gosh.
And we're back.
No, I did not want to continue doing that, but you made me.
Yes.
The bad singing
Water
in the key
against
of nothing.
I just nagged a lot.
You did. Welcome, BBs. Let's talk about socially conscious, I don't know, industry, enterprise, initiatives. Charity. Alysha from 2 Paychecks Away is an incredible human, and we just had the most amazing conversation, and we're so looking forward to sharing that with you from so many different capacities. Alysha really took her world into her own hands and made it into something that gives back, that nourishes her. She allowed enough space to be able to give the people she works with freedom of choice at every step of the way. And this is so relevant and so valid to all of our people listening who are really wanting to add elements of social consciousness and social awareness into whatever you do. So whatever you do on a daily basis, like this one's for you.
Yeah. And I think also she saw a need and she filled it.
Yeah.
She was like, this is actually a tool that I have and I can use it to help people. And she just did it, which I think is incredible, because how often do you see something that you could do, but you just don't? So really good example of someone just doing the thing.
Exactly. So without further ado, and I also have to highlight, it's Raquel's first time doing the introduction. So when it comes to that point, just do a little applause for Raquel.
Yeah. Cheer me on. It was a difficult one.
Cheer her on. Enjoy, BBs.
You're listening to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Christina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Good morning, everybody. Today we have Alysha here with us, which is very, very exciting. She is the founder of 2 Paychecks Away, which we're going to find out about shortly. But welcome to the show. Yay! It's so awesome to have you here. Hannah, our producer, actually introduced us. And as soon as I heard your story and I checked out what you're working on, I was so enamored. I cannot wait to dive in and ask you all of the billions of questions.
Excited to answer them all. I'm so passionate about what I do that I really do like talking about it. I mean, our whole purpose is about changing stigma and opening people's perspectives. So
yeah, you're changing lives.
I'm not changing lives. I'm changing days, but
I think, you know what? I think it can come down to a day.
Yeah.
I think you can change someone's life by changing their day sometimes.
I do agree with that. But I don't want to I don't want to think about it further than just what I am actually capable of. I mean, it's a hands-on project. So, I get my time, which is about an hour, and then I just hope for the best from there.
I love that. Yeah. I'm going to do a super mega official bio intro.
I just want to make this really clear that Raquel never does the intros.
I never do the bio.
So she really needs some hype people to tell her that she's going to do an amazing job of the intro.
We're going to do this.
You're going to do such a great job.
Come on, guys.
I'm excited for this. Let's hear it.
Thank you. We've got Christina, who's a real live actor, and then we've got me, who just hides all the time. And so I always just let Christina do it, and I was like, I gotta get out of my comfort zone.
Gotta be brave.
I gotta move forward. I gotta be brave. I gotta live full. Come on. But without further ado, Alysha has been is it Alysha or Alysha? Alysha, I'm so sorry. Okay. Alysha has been in the hair industry for 11 years. Starting her career in salons, she found a passion for barbering and switched lanes in 2011. I have questions for you about that.
Yeah, me too.
While living in Gastown, an area of Vancouver's Downtown Eastside, for those non-Vancouverites, she befriended some of the Downtown Eastsiders. After seeing the way they were being treated and having experienced addiction in her family, she decided to start 2 Paychecks Away, which is a phenomenal name. Also wanted to jump into that as a way to change the stigma around addiction, homelessness, and mental health on the Downtown East Side. 2 Paychecks Away unlocks the perceptions of spirited and resilient individuals from the Downtown Eastside by sharing their stories as told by their visit to the Barber. Welcome. Welcome. That is so incredible. So first of all, just to like really simplify this for people who are not from Vancouver, what is a Downtown Eastsider? For people who've just never been.
So Downtown Eastside is just a low income area. The Downtown Eastside it's kind of gas town, rail town, Chinatown. It's a mix, and people do get it wrong that being a Downtown Eastsider just means you're homeless, and that's not the case. There are a lot of people that have homes. It's just people that have low income or other issues that they're working to and trying to get back on their feet. I always say that, that you hold 2 paychecks away. The main things that get you on the Downtown Eastside are lack of support, and consistent income. And so if you don't have either of those, then there really is only one spot to go in Vancouver, and that's the Downtown Eastside. But also for the positive sides of it, because there's so many other resources that can kind of help you get back on your feet, and support systems.
I love that. And so the name 2 Paychecks Away is such a phenomenal name. How did you come up with that?
I was talking with my ex about when the whole idea came up, and he's like, well, we're all 2 paychecks away. And I was like, oh, I love this. And because there's so much combined with it, because I cut hair, when I first came up with the title, I was like, well, it doesn't really specify what I do, but at the same time it does, because it's not just about the haircuts. And over the last 4 years, I've been able to add so many different other elements of being able to kind of contribute to the community that I think it does. It's an overall, without 2 paychecks for myself, I would be in a very different situation. And for somebody that is on the Downtown Eastside, 2 whole paychecks, really can turn your life around. It's amazing.
I'm just going to say this as well. It's not just people who are low income, relatively speaking, for anyone to miss 2 paychecks in a row, depending on what your paychecks are, in terms of if it's a monthly one or a bi-weekly one or a weekly one, 2 paychecks is a lot to miss.
And think
just in general
about how with COVID and CERB, how many people now really resonate with the fact that 2 paychecks, that's a big difference,
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Thankfully,
it's huge.
BC was locked down for 9 weeks, but my family's from Southern Ontario. That was December to July.
Oh gosh. And I don't even, it's a little sidebar, but I've said this to Raquel before. We've talked a lot about the fact that we're so still in it that we're not recognizing, I think, that a lot of the trauma that's coming out of it. And I am actively not looking at the impact on the economy right now, because we have, there's other things. There's health is more important right now, and there are other things that we need to kind of rally for. And the unfortunate thing is that there's a huge divide at the moment, but it's not dissimilar to, and I say huge divide of opinions about different things, about the vaccine, about social things, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the world right now that is hugely divisive in and of itself. But the impact that it's having on the people, on the income gap everywhere in the world is huge. The people that are working class, or, if that's still working class, and I guess not even working, the class that's not even working, because we are still in a classist society for most people in the world. It's still very classist. Whereas the people who are making a lot of money, they're getting impacted, but not nearly the same way. And some of them are making a shit ton of profit,
depending on your role, to be quite frank. I mean, anyone in digital world has been doing incredible during this time.
Yeah.
Anyone who's in delivery world, anyone who's in grocery world, all of those kind of facets are doing really incredibly, actually, from a financial standpoint. That being said, they're also experiencing massive burnout.
Yeah.
Because they will have been running for the last year and a half on nothing. They just will have hit the ground running and not stopped for a year and a half. a lot of my friends in marketing and digital and anyone who I've known in digital startups are definitely burnt out.
Yeah.
Or health and wellness.
It's different kinds of burnt.
Yeah.
It's different kinds of burnt out for different people, right? You know, and again, I mean, this is what I wanted to ask, but I want to ask about barbering versus hairdressing.
Yes, yes.
And then I want to ask, because there's a part of me that wonders, you know, with people who are in the Downtown Eastside, like, and the people that kind of share some of those same characteristics, perhaps, they seem to be a lot more resilient already. And so I want to talk about that in terms of how do people who are not, you know, starved for income at this stage, how do we learn those lessons of how to become more resilient, and then also to make sure that we are paying attention to people that are going through the things that they are going through, and show that kind of compassion. But first, I want to ask about barbering versus hairdressing.
Okay. Barbering versus hairdressing. So I guess it comes down to, it's more, I'll break it up with services. So as a stylist, you're doing color and cuts and longer appointment times. And then with barbering, you're focusing more on facial services, whether it's shaves and beard trims, more precision cutting just because it's very short, usually like most of the time.
Yeah.
But my switch over was more for atmosphere for me. I mean, I was working in a pretty swanky salon when I first started, and I found that there was a lot of unnecessary competition, and I didn't really enjoy that environment. Whereas barbershops are a lot more laid back. I naturally get along with guys better, so it was a lot easier for me anyways. I would find, you know, if I did 2 colors in a day, about an 8-hour shift, and it's fun, but sometimes you get people in your chair that, you know, you just don't necessarily click with, and then you're stuck for 4 hours with them.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting that. I like the diplomacy.
Thank you. When it comes down to it, you know, I will be absolutely blunt. I just don't like women in my chair, but
I was going to say, can you barber my face?
That's right. Like, I found a lot of unrealistic expectations came with it. And so I started in Kelowna and then switched to barbering there. And when I came here, I worked in a barbershop, but we also did cater to women as well. And I did it for about 2 years. And then I had this woman come in and she's like, okay, so I want to be platinum blonde, but I don't want you to use any bleach. And I want to cut, or a trim, but don't cut anything off. And I was like, okay.
So did you just stand there staring at each other for 4 hours?
Which is, I mean, that's pretty much what I should have offered. But what ended up happening was so I did her hair, I took her platinum, I did use bleach, but that's the only way to do it, give her a trim, and she looks in the mirror at the end, and she's like white blonde, and she goes, just so brown. And I was like, oh my God. And so so my boss even came up to her and was like, is there an issue here? And she's like, it's fine. So she pays, she leaves, she canceled her payment. So I didn't get paid. and then she called and complained to my boss, who then brought her in, put her hair in foils with conditioner and rinsed her out. So nothing actually happened. And after he did his service, she was like, oh my God, it's perfect. And I was like, I'm done, can't do this anymore. And it was just because it was a gay male that did her hair that she believed him and she wouldn't believe me. And so those were the kind of interactions that pushed me into barbering.
Which, you know what? That's also a management thing. Because I have to say, when I was young, I worked at Fairmont Pack Rim in Vancouver. And that was the only real restaurant-y type of place that I ever worked. But they had amazing management. They wouldn't let anybody treat their employees rudely or badly. They had security there, but I had heard horror stories of some of the other high-end restaurants and things from the girls who worked there, where they were treated terribly and management didn't really stand up for them. And I think that's a big thing too, is having...
Agreed.
Your boss needs your back.
You know?
Yeah. They need to advocate for you. I worked in hospitality for over, probably 15 years. In Australia, I was trained, and I was in Melbourne at the time, and one of my one of the places was like a pub. It was like, you know, your standard, like run of the mill pub. We still had to do coffee training and food training. Like we had to get certified. They actively would throw people out if they treated anyone like they were.
Great.
Yeah, they actively were like, you can leave. This is our team. Our team is here to help you, not serve you.
Yeah.
They're not your servants.
See, that's fantastic. I did 10 years in the food industry as well, and just, yeah, it's
hard.
It is hard.
It's hard.
But I mean,
it's hairdressing is as well.
It is. Yeah. It is. It's but I mean, it's all about finding your niche too, right? And being in the right spots. And so, you know, after experiences like that, I've now been managing barbershops for 5 years, and it's nice to be the boss that's not treating people the way that you were treated. Like you learn from those lessons, you know?
Yeah.
You found your calling. Do you guys give whiskey with the haircuts?
No. Well, you want to know what? Okay, so they changed the rules a few years back, and BC decided to legalize beverages in salons and barbershops, and then Vancouver, as a city itself, voted against it. So you can actually go outside of Vancouver and get it, but we're not allowed to do it here.
No way!
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All I want is a glass of champagne while I'm having my hair done though.
See, and for women,
I do that in Amsterdam. Yeah, they give you champagne with your haircut.
And it's so nice. For women, it makes sense. Men, not so much. They love the idea of it, but I'm like, you have tiny hairs flying everywhere. You really want like an open drink in front of you? This is not fun. Yeah,
that's so true. Yes, I never really think about the practicality of these things.
Yeah, but the idea of it, I mean, you're sitting there getting pampered, and you get to have a cocktail while you do it. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that should just be like everything in life. Even if it's not a champagne, it's like some kind of tasty drink. As my friend Grace says, like a tea, a nice like sencha green tea.
Mm-hmm.
They do that. I think a lot of places do tea.
Yeah, a lot of places do. So okay, but we're sidetracking into beverage world. So I love the fact that you talk about management and you talk about building this. What really attracted you to get as involved as you did with the Downtown Eastside? Like, I know you said like you befriended them, but what does that mean? Like, how did you feel like, oh, okay, this is not only these are not people that I connect with in a more authentic way, which is what it sounds like, but these are also people that I can see a solution as to how I can help. Like, walk us through that journey.
Yeah. Okay. So there's, I guess 2 different parts to it. So I lived right on Carroll and Cordova. So in the heart of Gastown. Yeah. And it was when I was down there. I mean, you'd go out and you'd see the same person on the same corner or sitting outside of the same bar, or you'd walk by them every day. And like, I like the sense of community. I like, you know, talking to people as I'm going by, especially if it's a familiar face. And so that just became my normal. Like, you're walking down the street and you're like, oh, hey, Jody, what's going on? How's your day? Like, and that became normal. And then,
But wait, what did you say? Like the first interaction, right? Because I know a lot of people, and I really want to, sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of people just keep walking and they will never engage with those same people. Like, I know someone, Mike, he's often like outside the shoppers and we talk about whatever book he's reading. And I'll tell him what book I'm reading and we'll have like a little conversation. But a lot of people just want to put their head down and keep walking by because they don't want to engage. How did you engage?
I didn't actually remember my first time. I think I just did.
You just were like, hi, what's your name? I live just here.
It wasn't, like, you know, you see somebody often enough and then, you know, you say hi and then hi turns into how is your day and how are you and what's new. And then I think the conversation just over time progresses.
Okay.
And it is a natural, outcome. And sometimes it's more of, you know, they come up and talk to you. And as far as other people not doing it, I do think it's a sense of ignorance, which is why I do what I do, because you stop realizing that people have a backstory and you know, it's like almost like dehumanizing them as you walk by and not acknowledge. And it's kind of surprising. Even if somebody comes up and asks you for change, there's a reason they're doing it. They're not doing it to annoy you or bug your day or just, you know, regardless of what they're using the money for. It doesn't matter. Their life.
Yeah.
And, you know, when it comes down to any sort of addictions, I think people tend to forget that the source of most addictions is trauma that has not been treated. And Vancouver in general, you know, we've shut down so many facilities that help people with mental health that a lot of them ended up on the Downtown Eastside, and so they self-medicate. You know, it's not always just to get high. It's to whether it's physical or emotional pain, you know, it's something that needs to be addressed. And the city has a very hard time, I think, dealing with that because there's no blanket, like,
solution.
Yeah. Especially, you're totally right, because I used to live in Chinatown. And you see that a lot in Chinatown because there were some psychiatric facilities that were shut down. And then people who maybe needed more hands-on help were moved into like residencies, and more have to self-care, like they have to look after themselves, but they might not actually have the facilities to do that. So they need more hands-on help, more hands-on treatment. It just doesn't exist anymore because those facilities were shut down.
Exactly.
And then they're just trying to find any way forward, any way through. Yeah, that's very true of Vancouver.
Yeah.
So let's go to the second piece of this then, because I think that so you were like, okay, I know hair. And and then what was the part where you were like, good hair equals one step closer? I mean,
wait.
Oh, okay.
Before that, how were people treating your friends? Like you were seeing how people were being treated differently. Specifically, how were they being treated?
Well, whether it was a matter of just like people walking by and ignoring them, or like turning around, like somebody would ask for change and you'd see somebody turn around and just scream in their face. Or a perfect scenario is I worked with this woman about 5 years ago, and she lived in like near me, and so we took a cab back together, and we get in the cab, and I had just paid for the cab, and this woman came up and asked for money, and I was like, I literally just used all my change, I'm so sorry. And she turns around and she's like, get a fucking job. And I was like, excuse me? And that was my actual big aha moment. I ripped her a new one on the sidewalk, and I went home, and I went bananas. I was so upset about the fact that somebody thought that was a reasonable way to talk to a stranger. And then, so that, I guess that was the point that made me think I really wanted to do something. And then my aha moment for it actually came, I went down to Vegas for the North American Hair Awards. My old boss was, a finalist in that, so I went to go support. And it was a massive red carpet event. I'm all dolled up. I'm sitting in the fifth row. I'm watching. And all the before and after photos started showing up. And I literally started bawling my eyes out. And I was like, I know what I need to do. I'm like, models shouldn't be up there. People that need a help in life need to be up there. Tell their story, get it out. Like, you know, with an audience like this, why are we not doing that? Like, we're stuck in this superficial world where only beautiful people should have these luxuries, and it's just beyond me that is a thing. So
I love that so much.
Never mind the sense of like touch, the sense of, you know, having just care.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people are so isolated and they don't have someone else around, and just having something like, I mean, I think so many people can really feel how this would be after COVID, because so many people were isolated now over the last year and a half. But for people who are single, living alone, etc., to not have someone to just even human touch, human connection.
I have a story for this, actually.
Having a discussion.
Yeah, one of my clients at the shop, like at the barber shop, he came in a few months ago, and he was like, whoa, he's like, Alysha, like, you're the first person to touch me in over 3 months. And I was like, whoa. And he goes, but you were the last one to touch me 3 months ago. Aww. And I was like, whoa. Like, yeah. I know. And it's really crazy because, I mean, it's my job, so sometimes you forget those parts of it. And my photographer for the charity, we were doing an interview once, and he had brought up to me too that he's like, you know, the biggest difference that he's noticed watching me interact is that I walk up and I say, what do you want? What do you want to look like? because they're like, just do whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm here for. What do you want to look like? And watching them realize that they have a choice, and then have a specific time where someone focuses on them for a half hour. That's, I mean, should be just a basic right, but something that, you know, in that situation, they're not given as often.
And I think
Like the blue beard.
Yeah. Oh, Mouse.
Yeah,
Mouse was great. He was the very first one I did.
Oh, I loved that. I loved his story on the website and everything too. I thought that was
Yeah, we'll
sorry,
have to
Christine. I totally
we'll
cut
have,
you off.
no, but that I love that picture as well. Like, I think that's, you know, just highlighting that freedom of choice in a world where people are so, and I don't know how to say this without it sounding odd, but I think sometimes people can want to help so much that they want to dictate how they think help looks.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's something that I really want to like thank you and honor you for is that when we want to help other people, and I'm you know, I'm at fault for doing this a lot of the time where I'm like, hey, I know the solution, but I know the solution for you based on a privileged life that I lead, not the solution for you that feels best for you.
Yeah.
And that's not just with the people that you're working with, but I find it with a lot of people when I'm helping people in their careers, when I have to help myself and coach myself as to what I'm going to do next. I have to take a step back and exercise a sympathy that is not about me wanting to help you, in as much as it is me wanting you to feel supported for you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. Well, and it kind of comes back into that whole, for us, it's all about perspective. And so, you know, what you think versus what is reality is very different. And until you kind of put your own ego aside and bring up, you know, the other person or people, if it's a community-based thing, then, yeah.
And basic human rights, the right to choose.
Exactly.
What's best for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And like you said, service, like giving service to them rather than trying to construct something for them.
the solution.
Yeah.
What do you want for today? And I think especially when you talk about looks, so many people say, you know, when you look good, you feel good.
Yeah.
And I think there is a definite truth to that. And so if someone doesn't look the way they want to feel, it's not going to work for them anyways. They could look great to you, but if they don't think they look great to them or they don't look like them, they're not going to feel good. They're going to feel like they're in someone else's clothes. It's just not going to feel right.
Yeah. And I get to have more fun that way too, because I mean, for me, it's like, okay, sure, I have, you know, your base cuts figured out, but I had this woman in a few weeks ago, Darlene, who was amazing. We gave her shaved sides, a really cool pixie thing, and then she wanted a braided rat tail in the back to bring back like the early 80s. And I was like, 100%, let's do this. This is great. Like,
that is happening more and more these days, Kay. I have seen multiple people with these rat's tails, and I'm like, this is my childhood.
Yep.
I don't know how I feel about it, but you seem to love yourself right now.
And that's it. And so, you know, it gets to make me a little bit more creative in what I do as well. So.
I want to know, Alysha, tell me a few stories where someone has turned around to you and said, this is what you did as a result of sitting in that chair. I love the 3-month one, but tell me some of those things that people have turned around to you and been like, wow, because of you, I did this.
Well, I guess it's more circumstantial. When I first started, I worked out of a room with Working Gear, and they do clothing donations for men who are reentering the workforce.
Oh,
and
amazing.
so
Great.
It was neat because we would set up and they're coming in to get suits for interviews. And then it's like, hey, by the way, you can also get your hair cut because you can put anybody in a suit. But if it's not all matching, there's like, you know, an obvious difference there. And so that I found was really important. It's hard to follow up with people on the Downtown Eastside, as you can imagine. So sometimes I don't know what happens afterwards and how it works. The joy actually about the second edition of the book was that I was able to make changes 3 years later for updates for people who I was able to get back in contact with to see how they were doing. So those make me happy. But yeah, as far as changing someone's day, I mean, I do have a few Downtown Eastsiders who do comment on our social media after they've come in about how great they feel. And so that makes me feel really good. I had somebody refine me. He was one, like the first year I cut his hair once or twice, I believe. And then he just found us in our new location and came in like a couple months ago to get his hair cut and gave us an update on where he was, which was great. But I think rather than what people tell me, I have a story where I was, we were working with Beauty Night Society. And so they do makeovers. They'd go into shelters and they do makeovers and counseling and workshops for women specifically. And so we were working with them, and we went to this one shelter, and there was a woman who was sitting in the corner with headphones on, kind of watching us, but a younger woman. And I have two male volunteers on my team, and this was not a spot that men usually went in. We got a special permission from it. And so one of them was kind of coordinating who was getting what done and when, and he went up to her and was like, "Oh, do you want to get your hair done?" And she's like, "No, I actually think what you're doing is disgusting and you're exploiting us." And I was like, all right. And not a surprise. She's seeing somebody run around with a camera. Well, we're giving services. I get it. Right. Not being aware of what we did. And so about 20 minutes later, my chair freed up and she decided to come down and sit. And she's like, "Okay, I guess I'm going to get bangs." And I'm like, "Okay." And I was like, "I'm actually happy you came over. I run this charity and I wanted to explain exactly what it is we do and why there's somebody running with a camera." And so I explained it to her and I watched her perspective change. And she was like, "Oh, I actually kind of like this." And then I told her my history with my stepmom and my stepsister and losing them with addiction. And she opened up about her story. And it took all of 7 minutes before the two of us were crying in each other's arms. So that, and those are the moments for me that make it what it is. It's not so much as just being told, but, you know, feeling the change and even if I can relate with somebody and make their day more than the haircut makes their day, then that I think is important. So,
absolutely. Yeah. It's like an excuse to basically sit down with someone for part of your day, you know, and connect with them. So I wanted to jump back to something you had talked about earlier when we first started talking. You were saying how a lot of people assume that Downtown Eastsiders are all homeless, but that's not the case. There's a heavy poverty area. We talked about mental health issues. Can you talk about the different various people who are winding up on the Downtown Eastside and what some of those situations can look like for people who don't know and do think everyone there is homeless?
Winding up how so?
On the Downtown Eastside.
Just
so
in
if
general,
they're
like kind of the
Downtown Eastsider, yeah, then what is some of the scenarios
so they
as to why people are there?
There's so many. Let's see. Injury is a big one. So for instance, Mouse, you know, he broke his back in 3 places and came back and was not able to do any of the jobs he had done before. And so just trying to figure it out from that. There was Johnny who he had cancer and also a mental health issue. And so he actually turned to speed because it was the only thing that leveled him out enough that would let him work. And so he was a good example. Domestic violence is a big one, people trying to get away. And there's a lot of different levels too when it comes to housing. So, you know, we have people that still sleep on the streets or the tent cities that build their own communities. We've got SROs, which are the single room occupancies. There's temporary shelters, long-term shelters, modular housing, you know, and then there's long-term. So they do say on average it's at least about 5 years before you actually get like a long-term house for yourself, which is kind of crazy. There was one guy that just actually came back a few months ago that I saw in the beginning, Lilo. He, he's been bouncing around to a lot of different shelters, but he's got one mental health issue that's holding him back a bit that we've never talked about. But other than that, you know, he's got no criminal record. He doesn't do any drugs, no alcohol. And if you don't have a very obvious issue, you actually get pushed to the back of the line. which is so
Right.
hard because that's like people get caught in the system that really, if you gave them that one little nudge, they'd be out of it so fast and it could open up room for elsewhere. But I mean, again, it's not a simple answer. So
I talk about this a lot, Alysha, about invisible and visible barriers to entry. And the invisible barriers to entry can be so deconstructive to somebody's well-being.
Yeah.
Especially if someone is at the stage where they're not diagnosed and they don't know what they don't know because they've never been any different to that.
exactly.
And so, part of me really, my heart bleeds a little bit for the system in not educating us from young children to be more emotionally aware, to acknowledge when someone is. Raquel and I were just talking about this before. I had, and this is a very small scale thing, but I had a tough day and lashed out. And when I do that with Raquel, I will admit, like, some days she gets the brunt of my panic, and she recognizes it because she's educated in communication. She's like very emotionally aware, and she can recognize that it's not about her in this moment. It's about, trying to get me to not be in a fight or flight mode. And, similarly with people who have attention deficit disorder, who have, inability to focus for various reasons, who have, whether it's trauma or whether it's a predisposition to being neurodivergent, we don't recognize that as other members of society. And we don't know how to deal with it because nobody's taught us either. So we've got this massive gap.
Well, it's funny you say that. So this is a lot of what we've started to do after we came out with our first book is we actually focus on education. So we had partnered with UBC a few years ago and did a big exhibition out there. And then we've started getting our books into elementary and secondary schools. And so people will use them for art classes. They've done English classes. And we even had one where we partnered with a friend of ours who's a documentary filmmaker. And he did a doc called V6A. If you can find it, I highly recommend.
I went to it.
Did you? Okay,
I went.
So Ruggiero is and he is amazing.
Amazing documentary.
Yeah,
amazing. I loved that.
Partnered with him for like a little over a year whenever he was doing any of his showings. And
oh yeah, I took a bunch of friends. We all went to see it.
Really? Well, we may have been in the lobby.
Amazing.
Yeah, depending on where
Small
it was.
world.
And so we partnered with him and we got like a I don't know what to call it, I guess a studio. But we had two classrooms come and actually showed them the film. And Ruggiero brought one of the guys from the film and I brought one of the guys from my book. And we did a Q&A afterwards so that they could fully get an experience of what the idea of being on the downtown is like, but without exploiting that community, because I find that happens so often. And it is a fine line of what we do. And so anybody I talk to for photos or bios, like I'm very transparent about like, this is where it's going to be used. This is why we do it. And I won't put words in your mouth that aren't there. And if you're ever comfortable or uncomfortable with it, we will literally pull your photos. It's totally fine. But people that live down there want other people to know the difference because, it just, everybody's like, oh, Downtown Eastside, like it's the poorest postal code in the country, but that's not what it's about.
And it's interesting that you say that because I think, again, it comes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning is you're giving people the freedom of speech to tell their stories, not telling stories for them, which is just very patronizing.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing that you do it. And I think I just also want to ask and highlight at the same time, how much more effort is that to manage that expectation? Because you're obviously having to build that into your day, your interactions with people where you're like, hey, because you could easily just be like, we're going to give you $100 to use your photo and then never have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
But the emotional labor that you're taking on, which is 100,000% worth it, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd love to hear from you what that actually looks like, how you get to a point where you're like, so that when we do things, when we're employing people, when we have teams, it's transferable to everybody at every level. How do you manage the expectation to give people the most freedom?
As far as getting their photos done and shared.
Getting photos, telling them what the story is, empowering yourself, but giving them freedom of choice to say yes or no to anything.
So I've got, in the room that I work out of, I have a bunch of our before and after photos and a couple during photos all up on the wall above my station. So that when they come in, and it's not just a like business right away. So they'll come in, I have a couch in there, we'll sit down on the couch, we'll chat for a few, talk about what they want with their hair. And then I let them know no matter what, I'm going to do their hair. But the other side of what we do is about informing the public and educating people and changing the stigma. And so I'll show them the photos up on the wall. I've got a copy of my book in there. I'll show them what I've done with that. And anything that gets written down too during the appointment, they get to take a look at. It's on the back of our release form that we jotted down so that they can see it. And if they don't want me sharing something that was on there, they get an opinion of that too. And at the end, they get, my photographer will show them like the photos as we go through them, like the befores, a couple durings, and then it'll show the afters. And they're like, if you're okay with that, now you can sign the form. So it's
I love that.
Literally every step of the way, they get a choice. You know, if they don't like, if they find there's too many clicking noises while the appointment's happening, then Mihail will go sit down and just wait until we're done. It's not, you know, it's us not imposing. It's a safe space, and they get to make the choice literally in everything.
And I love that you're creating enough space for them to make choice. I think that's the really big thing, because Raquel and I we're building a career pathway program on the back end of Bombshell Branches right now, and everything that we ask is, okay, are we creating enough value? Are we creating enough transparency? Do people know what they're getting into? Do they have active choice? And that actually takes so much more than just telling. And I think this is like the through line of what you do so beautifully is you're facilitating rather than telling or showing or commanding. You're basically facilitating success rather than saying this is what it looks like and should be. No blanket. There's no blanket.
I think though that comes down to like, I'm going to go back to like the managing thing. There's a lot to be said in that, you know? And so I kind of, I treat that role the same way as well. It's, you know, everybody makes these rules and they make them very strict. And I mean, I get to a sense, but if you're too business, it's not fun anymore. And let's be serious. If we're getting into careers to do what we love, we want it to be fun. Yeah. And so being able to have people have the option to feel like they're heard and have a choice, and I think is just, everybody would be a lot more successful long term if we all kind of adapted that. Yeah. And so I don't know, it naturally played one into the other for me. And I guess it was
seems quite intuitive.
Space is really important too, though, because when things start running really fast, it can be easy to just have a reactionary, yeah, that's fine, don't worry about it, or you know, a reactionary no, depending on who they are. But giving them the time and the space to each step of the way learn a little bit more. Okay, take that little know-how. Okay, learn a little bit more about it. Okay, take that. Okay, now approve the photos. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm good. They've really had time to process that, and I think that's something when we're working on bombshells that can be really difficult because things are so fast-moving. So it's about finding, that's been something I've been thinking about as well, finding that space and creating that space for people to take a backseat and say, okay, yes, actually, I see the whole vision. I'm good with that. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be hard, right?
Yeah, it's
Everything
hard.
moves so quickly. I wanted to ask you, because you have partnered with schools, universities. I think you did a partnership with UBC as well. How did that all transpire? Like, how did that happen?
Do you get in touch with them?
We actually had one of UBC's librarians knows my photographer, and so she came out to an event and was like, I love this, and she brought it back to the university, and they were like, we love this. So it went from, I mean, and for me to be completely transparent, I never expected to run a charity. I wanted to give back for a year. That was my original plan. I was going to cut hair for a year, give back, maybe do an exhibition at the end, and go from there. And then it kind of became a book, and then it became a nonprofit, and then it was like, oh, where do we go now? Might as well try to be a charity. And my lawyer even told me that I messed up my application so bad. She's been doing this for like 25 years, and she's like, you're never going to get it. Like, this is bad. And I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden it comes in the mail, and I was like, well, here we go.
So, clearly a good lawyer.
It's like, I've just been like, I don't know. It's the same thing. It's learning as I go. It's what you guys are doing now. It's never ending because, you know, it's constantly adapting to whatever's next and what works, and whether that's for the charity's growth or my own personal growth. You know, I've probably had 2 full burnouts with the charity, and then you always have to make sure that you take care of yourself, because you can't help anybody else when you're in that position either. So it's finding the balance.
Yeah.
What do you do when you hit burnout? Because also, I think you're the main hairdresser.
Yeah,
barber.
I've had some barbers coming in over the years and helping, but it's pretty much just been me. Or what's really exciting is my brother just moved up from Ontario. He's my apprentice, so he's going to be the next one we see in photos.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's already started helping actually in the last month and a half, which has been great.
Oh, so great.
Yeah.
So when you hit burnout, what do you do?
I turn off my phone. I get an Airbnb in Squamish, and I hide for a week.
Love it.
I just do something local and easy, but I just find something where I'm going to be a little more closer to nature, and nobody's going to contact me. And then
that sounds like me.
Yeah, it's just downtime.
Yes.
I mean, because I think that's the problem when it comes to burnout. It's doing too much too fast, and just stretching yourself out for too long, right? And so being able to make sure that the days off, at least that you have, are going to be spent by yourself and doing that, not just try to push the social life because you haven't seen people in a while.
I think that's a good point as well. I have a lot of people, and a slight segue, but some people need to recharge by themselves in nature because they're introverted, right? And introversion and extroversion is a constant ongoing conversation about what it really actually means. And my favorite personal definition is that it's where you gain energy. So I am very extroverted presenting, but I do not gain energy from being out amongst people. I lose energy. It costs me energy. And it's energy that I love to spend, just like I love to spend on a good brunch. But I recharge by myself or with 1, maybe 2 people that I feel super safe with. And that's a representative of my introversion. Whereas other people they might have, get close to burnout because they're busy doing all this stuff on their own, and they need to go out and dance for 20 hours straight or whatever it might look like. Right. And I think just that piece of knowing who you are and what it takes to recharge, and then making sure that you're always able to have access, or as close to as possible, have access to doing that is so important.
I'm starting to just disbelieve in introverted and extroverted. Because on every test I've ever taken, I'm always 98% extrovert.
Really?
Always.
I'm so
insane.
surprised.
Right, because the first thing I do when I hit burnout is exactly what you're talking about. I shut down, I go into nature. I'm I will reemerge in a day. Sometimes it's
I would not put you as an extrovert like that. Yeah, I would, because you're always craving the nature respite.
But I do get a ton of energy from being around creative people, from being around people who are hustlers, from being around, from going out and dancing. Yeah. It just really depends on where I'm at, I think. It depends what level of burnout I've actually hit. If I've really hit a burnout or it's emotional, if it's something emotional, then I definitely need to get away. I'm a den person. I don't want to have people around. I want a bear. I just want to feel my feelings in my own little cave.
I do feel like that changes over time too, though, because I think when I was younger, I used to be more of an extrovert, and that's how and then the older I get, I find I kind of just want to, I don't know, be at peace with myself.
That could totally be it. That could totally be it. Yeah.
Just inner peace.
Right?
That's all we want. We did a whole segment on ageism and being no, age is not relevant, but phases definitely are. And I think that you get to a point where when you have so much, and especially actually I want to talk about what it feels like to be someone who is navigating a new space, that pioneering a new path, being the person that is fully accountable. As you were growing through your business, what mechanisms and tools were you using to make sure that you were safe along the way? Because you're the final point, right? And that's a lot of responsibility, which is a lot of emotional and mental stress.
Yeah, I want to say at the time, I don't think I even really necessarily realized that was the case, because it was kind of a what next? Let's just keep the balls rolling. So let's keep rolling with it. And then it was a lot of just, I think, trial and error as well. figuring out what worked and what didn't work. And the only thing that I knew as far as my face-to-face interactions go with all of the clients we have was that in the 4 years I've done this, I have never felt unsafe. I have never, people are like, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened? I'm like, I haven't. I've never run into that. It's just, making sure that the person in my chair is the most important person in the room at all times. Other than that, I think it just all kind of naturally worked itself out. There's some days when, actually that's a lie. Last kind of beginning pandemic, when I wasn't quite sure what to do, I was debating on whether or not I should end it because I was stressed out and it was a lot of responsibility. And on top of running the charity, I'm also running a barber shop, and I've got two on the go. And I'm like, in the 4 years I've been doing the charity, I still am just a volunteer. I've never paid myself or gotten anything from it. So it's, I'm like, okay, where does the line that I want to draw as far as being in good nature versus being work to, it was more of an internal struggle with me of kind of, I'd feel bad taking money, but at some point when you put so much time in, you really got to figure it out. I didn't have a social life for the first 2 years I did this,
Right.
So, yeah.
So what did you do? What was the turning point? How did you keep going?
Well, I think the break with COVID helped a lot, but then I got the opportunity. My boss offered me to reopen. I was running our financial location, and our Gastown location had been closed since March. So he offered for me to reopen the Gastown location, take it over, and then there was a back room that I could run the charity out of simultaneously. So once I was able to do that during my work day, everything made way more sense. It took a lot more stress off of me. And it gave me my time and space to be able to continue to grow. Because I don't know what direction I would have taken it otherwise. I'd love to say that it's such a certainty, but it never is.
It never is. Well, nothing is, right? No. We just get to a point where we're like, nothing's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no sense of control.
No. You keep trying until you decide that you don't want to try anymore, or, or take it in a different direction. That's.
Yeah. Or bring on someone else to help.
Yeah. And there's that too. Yeah. I mean, definitely terrible for that, but.
So are we. I mean, goodness, I was just like, Hannah, help me. Glenn, help me. Grace, Elvin, all of these people, everyone on the team, Nicole, we all know, we know them, and we're like, hey, we really believe, and this is what I wanted to bring that back to, because from my observation, it sounds like you really know what you value and you know why it's important so much that you allow for whatever is going to happen. And I think that's another thing that I think I'd love for everyone, to hear and to see when we have this conversation, is that if you really, really love what you do, you're not going to be in control of how it happens. And sometimes it does. Sometimes something has to implode for something else to grow.
100%.
As well, right?
This year I've really been kind of focusing on the power of positive thinking, because it's amazing. Because when you're just willing for everything to be positive one way or another, it's whatever your path of least resistance is usually just kind of what naturally falls into place. Yeah. So like you said, when something implodes and it doesn't work, another window's going to open at some point. You just got to kind of hold out for it, and there's a reason why it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. That just the serendipity of having your boss allow you to open up a space that allowed you to have that efficiency.
Yeah.
Those things, you couldn't have imagined that necessarily, right?
No.
You couldn't have imagined that opportunity. We can't fathom a lot of the opportunities that do come our way.
It's so interesting what you're saying too about how difficult it is to pay yourself. Because I know with Christina and I, we fund Bombshells. So we literally just out of our own money fund Bombshells. Now we've had some things roll in, so that's also funding it. But we don't take a cent. We don't even pay ourselves back for what we've invested in it. And, we've been talking about how we want to do all of these things. We want to grow it and we want to do all of that. But at some point, we're like, we actually need to be able to live while expanding. And how do we do that? At some point, we're going to have to actually create a system where we can earn. But then, I don't know about you, Christina, but I always feel this guilt. Like, no, but I should be putting the money into this and I should be putting the money into that and reinvesting into that. And I always feel this level of like, well, I don't really deserve to take anything. I'm trying to grow this thing. And it's difficult to, I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder, Alysha, if you've had that same kind of feeling and because there's levels to it as well, right? Like, I don't want to just live. I want to live full. I love brunches. I love bougie things. I can't afford half of the bougie thing, more than half of most of the bougie things that I want. But I also want, I think the trap is, especially when you're working in charity, the trap is that people will crucify you if you take more than what they deem is reasonable. And I think that that's a really shitty thing to do, because when people do that, it's like, well, it's okay for a lawyer to take $500 an hour for a potentially nefarious reason to defend someone who might not, who might be a mega billionaire. But if someone takes more than $100,000 and is heading a charity, then they're a demon monster from hell.
There's two sides to that, though, is the problem, is that there's people who do it reasonably, but then there's the other side, like known as poverty pimps, that people that come in and they start up these charities specifically to take the money that's supposed to be going into good deeds. So I think that
interesting.
Yeah, I think that
I like that. Thank you for the perspective.
Because there is two sides, but the problem is that regardless, the people, and because it's supposed to be charitable, how dare you make money? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, but you're right. The poverty pimps, that's a very good point. Yeah. Having people who are like, well, I'm going to capitalize, bold underlined capital under the capitalize. I'm going to capitalize on this. Raquel is like, she always laughs at me being like, break down that patriarchy. And I am still my father's daughter as well. I'm not trying to point fingers, but sometimes it's a matter of really understanding, well, what is the mechanism that helps to regulate that? How do you give people an opportunity? Like, let's say, for example, my best case scenario for your life, if I was to do the thing that I said don't do and tell someone what I want them to have in their life, but I would love for you to be able to say, like, here's the charity. It only makes this much money, but I have enough time and space to spend the time I want in nature, to live, like, to get really successful in another way, to have other revenue streams that are not relevant to this one, because this is not the thing. This is not the vehicle to make me a millionaire. This is the vehicle to help people. And my other investments are not to do with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How, if we can create a structure that exists, that's possible, that people aren't spending so much time pointing fingers at each other or trying to grab money from sympathy and fear-based constructs, then, we're a little bit better than we were before if we can manage to figure that one out. So I'll just leave that with you to sort out, because you seem like you have it all together. So when you have figured out this...
It's a work in progress.
Just a small thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the thing about what I do, the Downtown Eastside community. There's no easy answer. There never is. It's just not the way that we work. So, time, I think, is the biggest time, and people being open-minded enough to kind of realize. Yeah.
Now, before we go, I do want to ask about the coffee table books.
Yeah.
I know that I just want to find out more about them, where we can get them, how they, would maybe bring that level of understanding that you were talking about before, how they showcase that, and where we can find them.
So we came out with our first book about 3 years ago, and then the first edition, I can say. And so I sell those actually directly out of my shop now, because it's limited edition. We only have so many left. And then 2 days ago, we just came out with the second edition. The first one, however, was self-published, and now we have a 5-book deal with Friesen Press. So
Congratulations. Shout out Friesen.
Yeah. They do really, really good charity work. And so, they saw what we did. They were really interested. And because of the pandemic and us not being able to do anything for most of last year, they offered to do a second edition of the first book as our first book with them, which is great. So that came out 2 days ago. And you can buy that right through our website at paychecksaway.org. And then right now I'm hoping that by summer of next year, we're halfway through shooting our second book at the moment, which is all about the Downtown Eastside facing the pandemic and the changes that happen that we wouldn't necessarily think of that would be harder difficulties, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's well, if you need an audiobook narrator at any point, just let me know.
Be into this. You can make a different voice for every person.
Every person, yeah.
And there's a lot of them. So
I just get my character hat on.
Perfect.
Awesome. Practice my American, practice my Canadian accent. Love it.
Yeah.
That's so great. But that's amazing that you have that support. You know, I love the serendipity of the interaction with the librarian at UBC and that paving the way. And I think one of the things I did want to highlight as well is just how magnetic you've created your organization. You've made it so that people who know people who believe in what you're doing can find you. And you're just providing more and more ways for people to have this really beautiful, multifaceted understanding of what it takes to feel successful. One element of that, what it takes to exercise, values-led leadership, how much time that takes, working through your own burnout, being very open and honest and so generous with us with, all of this information and normalizing it not being a particular roadmap if you want to make a systemic change to the people that you are around.
I don't think there is a roadmap for anything. I think the more, everybody telling stories and sharing with each other is how we learn in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just the more information you can gather and the more transparent you are, just the more everybody's going to benefit.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why you can like and subscribe to this podcast and we will continue and follow us on Instagram because we will continue to spam Alysha and 2 Paychecks Away. And we'll keep up with news, with what you're doing. And you can find, you're on Instagram as well. Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so everything is just at 2 Paychecks Away. Paycheck spelled the Canadian way.
And the number 2.
And the number 2.
And the number 2.
Yeah, the 2 Paychecks
and
Away.
We'll put that in the reference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll put that in the links.
Or just go to the website and we have absolutely everything there.
Everything there. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for just being absolutely so generous, so wonderful. Thank you for all you're doing. I'm sorry that you won't work with women because my face needs barbering sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I am Eurasian. I have my dark Asian hair and then my European too much hair. So I'm, every now and then I need a mustache trim. Let's be honest. So I'll stop in at some point and be like, just please.
We can do it.
But thank you so much again. And we look forward to seeing you soon. I want to come in and check out the space.
100%. I'd love to have you guys in. That would be great. Yay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.